When the Siberian wind cuts through your bones in the middle of the night, Slavomir Rawicz had only one thought. Is there any way out of this hell? All around him was nothing but miles of frozen wasteland and endless pine forests. On top of that, he had to deal with the constant threat of guards with rifles and the gnawing ache of starvation. Just imagine for a second a 4,000-mile journey stretching out in front of you. No map, no food, and a body that's been reduced to a literal skeleton. Would you have the guts to take that first step? Slavomir Rawicz did. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of an incredible journey that will give you goosebumps. This isn't just a story about a prison break. It's a story about the absolute limit of human survival. The story starts back in 1939. Slavomir Rawicz, a young Polish cavalry officer, was arrested by the Soviet Union. His crime? Espionage. But the truth was, the charges were completely made up. He was taken to the infamous Lubyanka prison in Moscow, where he was put through psychological and physical torture that most people couldn't imagine. They wouldn't let him sleep for days, kept him under blinding lights, and beat him regularly. Eventually, he was sentenced to 25 years of hard labor and shipped off to a deep Siberian forest, to a place known as Camp Number 303. The trip to that camp was practically a death sentence in itself. They were packed into cattle wagons for months. Their only food was rotten fish and chunks of bread so hard they were like rocks. Countless people died on those tracks, but for those who survived the train ride, a much worse nightmare was waiting for them at the end of the line. That Siberian camp was a living graveyard. In temperatures that dropped to minus 14 degrees, the prisoners were forced to cut down massive trees. The guards didn't even worry too much about people escaping because they knew the geography was on their side. There was nothing but brutal wilderness for thousands of miles. But Slavomir wasn't the type to just give up and die. He started planning the impossible. He teamed up with 6 other prisoners. The group included an American engineer named Mr. Smith, 3 Polish soldiers, a Latvian, and a Lithuanian. They all knew the stakes. If they were caught, they'd be shot on the spot. If they did manage to get out, they'd likely die of cold or hunger anyway. But they decided that dying while fighting for freedom was better than dying like a caged animal. In April 1941, a massive blizzard hit. The snow was blinding, and the wind was so loud you couldn't hear a person screaming right next to you. This was their chance. Under the cover of the storm, they cut through the wire fence and disappeared into the woods. They had almost nothing, just a little bit of dried food, an axe, and a handmade knife. The blizzard was actually a blessing because it wiped away their footprints instantly. But the real fight was only just beginning. They decided to head south, hoping to reach British India. To get there, they would have to cross the Siberian forests, Lake Baikal, the Gobi Desert, Tibet, and finally, the Himalayan mountains. The first few weeks were pure agony. They walked all day and spent the nights digging holes in the snow, huddling together just to keep their body heat from escaping. Hunger was driving them crazy. They ate tree bark and tried to hunt small animals whenever they could. After months of walking, they reached Lake Baikal, where they met a young girl named Christina. She was also a fugitive running from the Soviets. She joined them, and for a while, having her there boosted the group's morale. But the journey was heartless. The combination of exhaustion and starvation eventually took Christina's life. Then, one by one, a few more members of the group started to fall. But Slavomir and the remaining survivors didn't stop. They couldn't. Ahead of them lay their biggest challenge yet, the Gobi Desert. If Siberia was a frozen hell, the Gobi was a furnace. After months of freezing, they were suddenly hit by blistering heat and air that felt like fire. The lack of water turned their tongues into dry wood. It got so bad that they were forced to drink their own urine just to stay alive. During the day, the sand was so hot they could barely walk, and at night, the temperature would plummet back to freezing. In the Gobi, the mind starts to play tricks on you. They saw mirages of lakes and cities in the distance, only to find more burning sand when they got there. They lost track of time. They didn't know how many days or weeks they had been walking. Their bodies were failing, but Slavomir kept repeating one thing like a prayer. We have to go south. Once they finally cleared the desert, they were met by a massive wall of rock. They had reached Tibet, but there was no time to celebrate. Now they had to cross the Tibetan plateau, often called the roof of the world. The thin air made it hard to breathe, and the altitude sickness was constant. It was here, in the middle of nowhere, that they claimed to see something truly bizarre. Something that remains a mystery to this day. Slavomir wrote that they saw two massive, hairy creatures standing about 8 feet tall in a mountain pass. They believed they were seeing the legendary Yeti. Whether those creatures were real or just a hallucination brought on by months of starvation, we'll never know. But for them, the experience was terrifyingly real. After Tibet came the final hurdle, the Himalayas. Climbing through treacherous passes and dodging avalanches, their group had shrunk even more. Out of the original 7, only 4 were left. They were walking skeletons, their clothes were rags, and their skin was stretched tight over their bones. But their will wouldn't break. When they finally stood on a peak and saw the green valleys of India in the distance, they broke down in tears. In March 1942, after walking 4,000 miles, they finally crossed into British India. When they wandered into a small mountain village, the locals were horrified. They looked less like men and more like ghosts that had crawled out of the earth. The big question that historians still argue about today is this story actually true? Many experts say it's physically impossible for a human to survive that distance on foot with no supplies. Some Soviet records even suggest that Slavomir might have been released in a prisoner amnesty rather than escaping. But even with the doubts, the power of Slavomir's story hasn't faded. The way he described the thirst in the Gobi and the silence of the Himalayas feels too vivid to be a complete lie. Maybe he exaggerated, or maybe he combined different experiences into one narrative. But for anyone who has studied the horrors of the Gulag, the spirit of the story rings true. It represents the desperate lengths a human being will go to for a taste of freedom. This journey wasn't just about moving your feet. It was a battle of the mind. Slavomir Rawicz showed us that when your back is against the wall and you have nothing left to lose, you can find a strength inside you that can move mountains. Their 4,000-mile trek is a testament to the human spirit. Those 4 men, lying on the soil of India and breathing the air of freedom, were thinking of the friends they left behind in the snow and sand. Their journey remains one of the greatest survival stories ever told. What do you think? Do you believe Slavomir really made it all those miles on foot, or is it just a legendary tall tale? Imagine yourself in his shoes, thousands of miles of wilderness, and nothing but your will to keep you moving.
Almost gone.